Amid major cuts to National Weather Service and NOAA and other federal agencies that monitor and track and warn folks about the weather, HHS Secretary Kristi Noem is defending the government's response to the disaster in Texas. Kristi Noem says that President Trump is, quote, currently upgrading technology at the National Weather Service. However, the president's mega bill, which he just signed into law on Friday, makes cuts and even closes some weather research labs that help make forecast improvements. A local meteorologist tells us the area is so prone to flooding here in central Texas. It's known as Flash Flood Alley. And local officials say because the area is so sparsely populated that no one was there to warn folks of what was coming downstream.
Going to be a long time before we're ever going to be able to clean it up, much less rebuild it. But there's nothing on the other side of Criders. It's just hill country. And we didn't know. We know we get rains. We know the river rises. But nobody saw this coming.
Joining us now to discuss is former FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell. Administrator, thank you so much for being with us. The National Weather Service, we've learned, sent out early morning warnings about life-threatening flooding, but officials say they would have had a difficult time figuring out how serious this threat would be. Given what we know now about the forecast and the warnings that were put out, do you think there was a breakdown between forecasting and local preparedness?
Good morning, Boris. I just want to first start by saying how much my heart breaks right now for all of those families in Texas and watching what's going on. We continue to see so many of these types of severe weather events just intensify at a rate that isn't expected. And I think, my opinion is that we need to continue to invest in the research that's needed because the types and the strength of these storms keeps breaking records and keeps surprising people because of the impacts from the changing climate. And so, whether there was a breakdown or not, I wasn't there, so I can't say. But I know that we need to continue the research so we can better understand how these storms are intensifying and what the damage potentially could be from them.
Well, do you have any awareness or understanding of what the Secretary is describing in terms of technology upgrades that are needed? Obviously, National Weather Service, a separate agency, but nevertheless, it seems like she's insinuating that this is a long-held problem. I wonder if you had ever been aware of it.
No, I personally have not. I mean, the National Weather Service has amazing forecast centers, right? We use a lot the National Hurricane Center. There's the National Water Center. There's the Storm Prediction Center. And it's a combination of technology and scientists that come together to understand these storms. And so whether or not they have technology that needs to be updated, I don't know. I mean, technology changes so rapidly that there's certainly a possibility that technology needed to be updated, but we also need to have the people that can use it and understand and look at these storms and understand how they're going to react and where they're going to provide the most impact.
Yeah, and to that point, I'd recently spoken with officials with the National Weather Service who had been warning that a lot of areas are understaffed in part because of DOGE cuts. We also have the president signing the Big Beautiful Bill Act into law, which guts a number of different programs. The president has been direct in his view that federal emergency response should be handled by the states. He has a very different perspective of what the last 4 decades or so of federal emergency response has been. I wonder what your concerns might be about having states, individual states, look after folks when things like this happen, because these incidents are of enormous scale. I wonder if you think that that would be an impediment to getting folks the help that they need.
Boris, it's important to remember that states and local jurisdictions have always had the responsibility to take care of the people in their communities. I was a local emergency manager in Colorado as well as in New York. And every one of these types of events starts and ends with that local emergency manager. And then the state comes in to assist. And that's what we're seeing happen in Texas right now. And Texas is a very capable state. You know, I had to talk to Governor Abbott many times because of the severe weather that we experienced during my time as administrator. And he has a great team and they do a good job of getting out there. But we see these events continue to become so significant and exceed expectations that even a state like Texas needs some assistance, right? And so, how is that assistance going to continue to be able to be offered and deployed to communities that need it timely, right? We need to get resources in there as quickly as possible to help with search and rescue, but also this massive debris removal effort that's going to have to happen in the next days, weeks, or even months after a storm like this.
Former FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell, we have to leave the conversation there. We're so grateful to get your perspective. Thanks for joining us.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is on the ground, and she immediately said President Donald Trump will honor the federal disaster declaration signed by Texas Governor Greg Abbott. We've covered so many disasters over the years with different presidents. What did you take away from the secretary saying that the president will honor this request?
It's not clear exactly what that means. It hasn't cleared through the president just yet. He hasn't signed. I just checked my email. The disaster declaration hasn't come through. Often these are pro forma. They come through with ease. Often presidents approve them even before the disaster hits. But in this case, it was a surprise. It was a flash flood that came out of nowhere. And so they weren't able to, stage resources in advance. I think there are a lot of questions right now that we don't have answers to about how things are going to work this year as hurricane season is beginning, as really the summer disaster season gets underway, with the changes that the president has talked about and how he wants FEMA to work. I think there are still a lot of questions about what that means and how it will work and sort of functionally on the ground what it'll look like.
Maureen, you cover the House of Representatives, obviously. This clearly impacting Texas members as well, including one whose daughters were at this camp.
Yeah, Congressman August Pfluger spent the week here in Washington trying to pass this one big, beautiful bill, only to come home and realize his daughters were missing for a certain amount of time. He has since posted that the family's been reunited and actually thanked a number of the federal officials, including FEMA, for trying to help in this effort. And, something that I will be watching is how Congress responds, because so far we have seen a Republican-led Congress, both the House and Senate, not send disaster aid out to California after those wildfires earlier this year. Leaders actually saying that they don't trust Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom to be able to actually responsibly use that money. I don't think they will be saying the same thing if and when a disaster relief request comes in. This is obviously a Republican-led state, but they're going to be having to manage a number of things, including Trump's own budget this year, asking Congress to defund FEMA and also make sure to cut a number of other organizations. The fact that you have a congressman who has been directly affected, I think Congress might be looking at this in a different way than the Trump administration initially was looking at all of these responses.
Laura, what have we heard so far from the White House, and what are you watching for in terms of the administration's response to this?
Well, earlier when you talked about whether or not the administration would honor that word that the secretary used, honor a request, I think it's also because we have a history of President Trump in the past, sometimes politicizing after natural disasters like this, depending on which state was hit by a natural disaster. Him maybe not sending money to blue states or states that are led by Democratic governors. The fact that North Carolina also wanted more funding after their natural disaster prior to the president taking office, and them not getting it once Trump came into office. So I think that you've seen him being willing to withhold more disaster relief from states when he thinks that maybe his voters aren't in that state or they aren't impacted. And there's reporting from the first administration that it was only when he found out that certain voters of his, people who supported him, were impacted, that then he decided to release more funding. So again, yes, to your point, I think that the response to Texas may be very different, given that he is going to be facing some pressure from a number of Republicans in Congress to respond to this quickly.
There's nothing like a disaster that really shines the light on why government is needed, why these bureaucracies and infrastructure is needed. But many questions obviously will be raised about the warning systems in the National Weather Service. But here's what one official with the National Weather Service Employees Union told CNN. He said that while he believes the offices had adequate staffing and resources, the Austin San Antonio office is missing a warning meteorologist, a role that serves a crucial and direct link between forecasters and emergency managers. It says vacancies were the result of early retirement incentives offered by the Trump administration. So as we learn more about this, what do you think this says, and what questions do you have about the overall readiness of this government in the wake of DOGE and other cutbacks?
There is a balance between acts of God and what man and government can do to prevent people from being hurt by storms that come out of nowhere and massive rushes of water. I mean, some of this, you can do a lot of after action reports and you can do a lot of studying and you can find things that could be done better, but the fact is the water was still coming.
And certainly there's a lot of discussion about research and funding and how much these storms are actually intensifying.